Wrestling has seen its fair share of legends, but few have left a mark quite like Rowdy Roddy Piper. With his signature kilt, unmistakable bagpipe entrance, and a mouth that could tear down even the biggest names in the industry, Piper wasn't just a wrestler. He was a force of nature. From his turbulent childhood to his rise as one of wrestling's greatest villains, and ultimately to his heartbreaking battle with illness, this is the story of Rowdy Roddy Piper. A life lived at full speed, a career that changed wrestling forever, and an ending that left fans around the world mourning the loss of a true icon. Early life and family background. Roddy Piper, originally named Roderick George Toombs, was born on April 17, 1954, in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. From the very beginning, his life was anything but ordinary. His parents, Eileen and Stanley Baird Toombs, were part of a structured, disciplined world. His father served as an officer with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The family moved frequently due to his father's profession, which often created instability for young Roddy. One of their notable stops was The Pass, Manitoba, a small remote town where Piper spent part of his early years before eventually settling in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Growing up in a strict household under the roof of a law enforcement officer, Piper had a difficult and often turbulent relationship with his father. Stanley Toombs was a man of discipline, someone who likely expected his son to follow a structured path. However, young Roddy was anything but obedient. He was rebellious, independent, and constantly at odds with authority figures, including his own father. This tension only worsened as he grew older, leading to a sense of isolation within his own home. Piper's defiant nature started to manifest during his teenage years. He attended Windsor Park Collegiate Secondary School, but his time there was short-lived. In what would become a defining moment of his youth, he was expelled for bringing a switchblade to school. While the exact details of the incident remain unclear, it was a sign of the aggressive, tough persona he was already developing, one that would later define his wrestling career. This expulsion didn't just end his formal education, it was also a breaking point in his already fractured relationship with his father. After being expelled, Piper found himself on the outskirts of his own family. The conflicts at home reached a boiling point, and he left at a young age. This wasn't a simple teenage act of rebellion. He was out in the world on his own, without parental support, without a clear direction, and with very few resources. To survive, he moved from one youth hostel to another, constantly searching for shelter. During this time, he took on various odd jobs at local gyms, just to afford food and a place to sleep. But it was in these very gyms that he first became exposed to the world of professional wrestling, a discovery that would change his life forever. What's fascinating is how Piper's tough upbringing directly influenced the wrestling persona he would later adopt. His real-life struggles, growing up in a strict household, constantly feeling like an outsider fighting for survival on the streets, would shape his ability to play the ultimate heel in the wrestling ring. He wasn't just acting tough, he was tough. Every bit of anger, every rebellious action, every fight he got into as a teenager was fuel for the brash, unpredictable character that fans would come to know and love. Struggles, an introduction to wrestling. His expulsion further worsened his relationship with his father, leading him to leave home as a teenager. He lived in various youth hostels and took on odd jobs at local gyms to support himself. It was during this time that he was first exposed to the culture of professional wrestling. He worked as an errand boy for professional wrestlers and learned the business from them. Additionally, he became skilled at playing the bagpipes, though he later admitted that he had no recollection of how he learned. Early wrestling career Piper started as a boxer and amateur wrestler before stepping into professional wrestling. He was a successful Golden Gloves boxing champion and earned a black belt in judo under Jean LaBelle. He began his professional wrestling career under the guidance of promoter Al Tomko in Canada and made association against Larry Hennig. Between 1973 and 1975, Piper mainly worked as a jobber to more established wrestlers. However, as the mid to late 1970s progressed, he gained experience and fame in smaller promotions. He adopted several ring names, including the Masked Canadian, and participated in storylines with legendary wrestlers such as the Guerrero family. Even early in his career, Piper displayed his natural ability as a heel, riling up crowds like no other. Before signing with the WWF, Piper competed in 3 matches at Madison Square Garden in 1979, while Vince McMahon Sr. was in charge of the promotion. He officially debuted in the WWF in 1984 as a manager due to injuries he had suffered in a dog collar match at Starrcade. However, his tenure as a manager ended, and he resumed wrestling in the WWE. During his early years in WWE, he feuded with notable wrestlers such as Jimmy Snuka and Bruno Sammartino. His rivalry with Hulk Hogan led to his participation in the first ever WrestleMania on March 31, 1985. At WrestleMania 2, he fought Mr. T in a boxing match. After this, he took a brief hiatus from wrestling but returned as a face on August 23, 1986. From 1984 to 1987, Piper hosted the popular segment Piper's Pit, where he interviewed fellow wrestlers. His charisma and popularity earned him a Slammy Award in 1986 for Best Personality in the Land of a Thousand Dances. Despite his fame, Piper only won a handful of championships during his WWE tenure. He became the WWF Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion in 1992 at the Royal Rumble after defeating the Mountie, but he lost the title to Bret Hart 3 months later at WrestleMania 8. Later, career in wrestling. In January 1996, during an episode of Raw, Piper was named the new interim president of WWE. One of his most significant acts in this role was bringing back the Ultimate Warrior. He also feuded with Goldust, culminating in a match at WrestleMania 12, which Piper won. In 2000, Piper wrestled for World Championship Wrestling, WCW. In 2005, he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. He later won the World Tag Team Championship with Ric Flair at Cyber Sunday on November 5, 2006. Acting career outside of wrestling, Piper pursued acting. He made his film debut in 1978 in an uncredited role in the comedy film The One and Only. In 1986, he landed his first leading role as Quick Rick Roberts in Body Slam. One of his most iconic roles was as John Nada, a drifter, in the 1988 cult classic They Live. That same year, he starred in another cult classic, Hell Comes to Frogtown, directed by Donald J. Jackson. Piper continued acting until his passing. One of his last notable roles was playing Daw Maniac in an episode of Rob McElhenney's sitcom, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Personal life. Roddy Piper was known for his wild, unpredictable persona in the wrestling world, but behind the scenes he was a devoted husband and father. In 1982, he married Kitty Jo Dittrich, the woman who would stand by his side through the highs and lows of his career. Despite the larger-than-life character he played in the ring, Piper was deeply committed to his family, valuing his role as a husband and father above all else. Together, he and Kitty Jo built a home filled with love and laughter, welcoming 4 daughters, Ariel Teal, Fallon, Danica, and Anastasia Shea, and a son, Colton Baird. While Piper's wrestling persona was known for being brash, aggressive, and at times outright chaotic, Those who knew him personally often described him making time for them, despite his demanding schedule in the wrestling and entertainment industries. In interviews, his daughter Ariel Teal has mentioned how her father was her hero, not just in the ring, but in real life. His ability to switch from the intense, trash-talking wrestling villain to a gentle and devoted dad is a testament to the complexity of his character. By 2006, Piper was well into the later years of his wrestling career. He had already cemented his legacy as one of the greatest heels of all time, but the fans still loved him. That same flair at Cyber Sunday on November 5th, 2006. Their opponents? The Spirit Squad's Kenny and Mikey, a young, brash tag team that had been dominating the scene at the time. Despite being considered past their prime, Piper and Flair proved that experience and ring psychology still had their place in wrestling. On that night, the two veterans pulled off an unforgettable victory, winning the WWE World Tag Team Championships. It was a special moment, not just for Piper, but for fans who had grown up watching him. Seeing him hold championship gold again, years after his prime, was a nostalgic and emotional moment for many. Following their title win, Piper and Flair took their championship belts on the road, joining WWE's European tour. For Piper, this wasn't just another wrestling trip. It was a chance to reconnect with fans across the world, some of whom had been watching him since the early days of his career. Unfortunately, what should have been a celebratory tour soon took a dark turn. Piper began experiencing serious health issues during the trip, a foreshadowing of the battle that awaited him upon returning to the U.S. Though he continued to show resilience, even in the face of illness, this moment marked the beginning of the final chapter in his legendary career, and ultimately in his final battle against illness. Even in the later years of his career, long after many of his peers had retired, Piper continued to entertain fans with the same fire and intensity that had defined him from the very beginning. But by late 2006, something was wrong. During WWE's European tour, Piper began experiencing unusual weakness in his legs. For a man who had built his entire career on his endurance, toughness, and larger-than-life presence, this sudden physical limitation was alarming. He had taken countless hits, fought through serious injuries, and endured one of the most brutal schedules in professional wrestling. But this was different. This time, his body was telling him that something far more serious was at play. Recognizing the urgency of his condition, WWE officials wasted no time. Piper was immediately flown back to the United States for medical evaluation. When the test results came in, the news was crushing. He had Hodgkin's lymphoma, a form of blood cancer that affects the body's immune system. More specifically, his diagnosis was low-grade 2A lymphoma, meaning the cancer was still in its early stages, but aggressive enough to require immediate treatment. For most, such a diagnosis would have been overwhelming. But Piper, ever the warrior, refused to let fear control him. He didn't dwell on the possibility of losing. He only thought about how to fight back. He approached cancer like he had approached every opponent in the ring, head on, with unwavering determination. Over just 4 grueling weeks, Piper underwent 20 cycles of radiation and chemotherapy, a punishing treatment schedule that would have broken many others. The side effects were brutal. Radiation drained his energy. Chemotherapy left him weak, and the mental toll of facing such a deadly disease was immense. But true to his nature, he kept going. Even during the hardest days, he maintained his trademark sense of humor, refusing to let cancer steal his spirit. On January 15, 2007, he completed his radiation therapy, marking what should have been the end of one of the toughest fights of his life. Though he had conquered cancer, Piper's body had already endured decades of physical punishment from his wrestling career. The toll of steel chair shots, brutal brawls, and countless injuries had left him with multiple concussions, fractured bones, and chronic pain. He was one of the toughest wrestlers of his generation, but even the strongest warriors have limits. Despite his declining health, Piper continued to make appearances in the wrestling world. Fans still cheered for him, still wanted to hear his fiery promos, still saw him as the rowdy, unbreakable figure they had grown up watching. But behind the scenes, his struggles persisted. His heart, weakened by years of wear and tear, was fighting a battle of its own. On July 31st, 2015, Roddy Piper passed away in his sleep at his home in Hollywood, California. He was just 61 years old. The official cause of death was cardiopulmonary arrest, a sudden stopping of the heart, brought on by hypertension, high blood pressure. A pulmonary embolism, a blood clot blocking an artery in his lungs, was also listed as a contributing factor. The news shocked the wrestling world. Though fans knew he had faced health struggles, Piper had always seemed invincible, a man who could take any punch and still keep fighting. His death was a heartbreaking reminder that even the toughest warriors are still human. As per his wishes, Piper's body was cremated, and his ashes were scattered at his home in Gaston, who had spent his life in the spotlight, yet always valued his family over fame. Even after his passing, Roddy Piper's legacy remains as strong as ever. His unforgettable promos, his fearless attitude, and his ability to captivate an audience continue to inspire new generations of wrestlers. To this day, his influence can be seen in the way modern superstars talk on the mic, engage with the crowd, and craft their characters. Roddy Piper may have left this world, but his presence in professional wrestling and in the hearts of his fans will never fade. He wasn't just another wrestler. He was a pioneer, a showman, and a storyteller who turned every match, every promo, and every feud into something unforgettable. Whether you loved him or hated him, you couldn't ignore him, because Rowdy Roddy Piper demanded attention the moment he stepped into an arena. That's the content of today's video. If you enjoy the video, give us a like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive more of our new videos. Thanks for watching.